So today we're going to talk about, first of all, the basics of how you edit in Adobe Premiere. And Adobe Premiere is free for all UQ staff to utilize as part of the Adobe agreement. So you have it there available for you. And then talk about basic video and audio correction as well. So how you actually, if you have a piece of video that's a bit dark, how do you brighten that up? How do you maybe sharpen it? And you have a bit of audio that has a bit of background noise. How do you correct that? So we'll be talking about that. Also about utilizing UQ approved templates. So UQ does have very specific branding and templates that they use for media. And there are a few different rules depending on whether it's internally facing or externally facing. The templates that I use today and the techniques I show you today, they're sort of mainly for internal use, whereas if it's going to be external, then there might be different fonts that you use and different standards. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then exporting your videos for use on various platforms. So nowadays, video editors, they have really, really good export settings, very, very clear and easy. Only a couple of tick boxes that you need to tick in order to export your video out as a standalone media file that you can then upload to Echo or to YouTube or to wherever it needs to live. So if you were in yesterday's session, we talked about, the pre-production process, which is the script writing and choosing a video format and stuff like that. If not, then when we're talking about producing a video, they often happen sort of in a few different stages. You have pre-production, where you decide, all right, what video am I producing? Write a script, write a storyboard, exactly how is it going to play out, what's going to be said, what's going to be seen. And then you have the production process, which involves actually setting up the camera, filming, recording voiceovers, doing whatever to actually get the video or audio files recorded from your session. And then, of course, there's today, which we're going to focus on the post-production. So this is essentially, copying your clips to your computer and getting them in a structured folder, importing them into Adobe Premiere and using the correct UQ template. Choose the bits of the clips that you want to use when you're arranging them into your sequence for editing. Edit any graphics required, do any color correction required, adjust the audio, and of course, export it out. So that's sort of what we're talking about when we say, pre-production, production, and post-production. And just a note that I do have my chat open here, so feel free to just put any questions or comments as we go along in the chat, and I'll glance down every so often to have a look and answer any of those questions. So first of all, what are we going to look at today? So the type of look at is a bit of a lab demonstration. So this is what we would sort of consider like a presenting to camera style video, demonstrating a particular process. So this individual, he's basically demonstrating a sort of a tiny qubit, which is a type of a component of a quantum computer. And so he's speaking to camera. He demonstrates a piece of the equipment, continues speaking to camera, demonstrates again, speaks to camera, and then you have a little bit of a close-up of the actual device working, and then it goes into a close. And you'll see at the beginning, we have the nice UQ introduction slide. We have what we call a super, which is a superimposed text over the top, which will have the presenter's name and their position. And then what we call a closing slide, which just has the University of Queensland logo. And so, that's a good opportunity now to actually show you the interface of Premiere. So it can look a bit scary. It can look like there's a lot going on. Particularly if you're used to some more simpler video editors out there. But the nice thing really about all video editors is they all work the same. You all have, so for example, over here in the bottom left, and this isn't exactly how Premiere will look for everyone. Sometimes when you open it up, things will be in different places, but generally they'll sort of be in a similar area or they'll look the same. So this is where you have all your files, so where all your files are imported to. All right. So this is where you bring in any video files, any images, any sounds, and I'll show you that in a moment. Up here is where you have your effect controls. So effect controls is changing things like the size of a piece of video, rotating it, changing its opacity, and you can also do a little bit of color correction in here as well. Also changing the volume of your audio, and that tends to change depending on what you're clicking on. So if you click on an audio piece of audio, you'll see it changes for you to change settings for audio, whereas if you click on a piece of video, it changes to more video specific kind of settings. In this top section here, we have the viewer, which is essentially where you watch your video that you've been editing. And you'll see it has some controls here where you can play
nitrogen
and stuff like
atom,
that.
and then
and that sort of works in combination with the timeline. So this down here is what we call the timeline. And that's essentially where we lay up all our clips. So once we bring in all our video clips, we drop them onto this, what we call the timeline, and then we can position them, arrange them into the video that we want to produce. And this little blue thing, some people call it a playhead, some people call it a current time indicator, some people just call it the line you drag along, whatever you want to call it. Essentially what that does is it allows you to just quickly sort of navigate through your timeline quite easily to get a bit of an overall picture, quickly zipping through it, or what we call scrubbing through your timeline to give a bit of an overall view of what's going on. Over on the right-hand side, this is where you'll do your color correction. It's a much nicer area than doing it in here. You'll see how on the left, top left, you've got this Lumetri color, which is your color correction. It's a bit kind of compressed and doesn't look as nice. So we usually operate that from over here, where you have much nicer sliders and it's a bit clearer. You also have the ability to play around with sound here as well. And the graphics for your essential graphics are essentially these elements. Like the super, the label, and this intro. That's what we call essential graphics. And I'll show you in a moment how they're imported and how they're utilized. So that's generally the look and feel of Premiere. If you ever lose a window for whatever reason, it goes away. You can't find where your effects are. You can't find where your file structure is. You can't find where your color settings are. You can always go up to Window and you'll see these little ticks, and that'll basically allow you to go in and tick, all right, well, if I untick effects, so I've also got an effects panel down here as well. So if you want to bring up the production panel for whatever reason, you can open that up, or you can close that production panel off. So actually it doesn't untick it. Only if you want to get rid of it, you got to right click on the name and go close. And then, if this ever happens, where things like compress and go weird because your windows have been a bit funny, you can always just click and drag the horizontal lines, and that allows you to sort of move your interface around. Or alternatively, if it completely goes balls up, what you can do is you can go to Window, Workspaces, and you can probably just go down to something like Editing. And if you click on Editing, then sometimes it'll kind of bring it back to a bit of a default space. And you got your effect controls up here and your audio controls and stuff. And then, down here, you might have lost your Lumetri, so you can just go to Window and go to Lumetri color and kind of get that back, and that'll pop up. So that's sort of how you find stuff if it ever vanishes. You'll see my essential graphics has now vanished, my audio has vanished, so I can just go to Window, Essential Graphics, Window, Essential Sound, and that'll also sort of populate back to the way I originally had it. So yeah, if you ever lose it, you can always get them back. So we're actually going to start from scratch for this project. So I'm actually just going to go File, Close, and I'm not going to save it. Oh yeah, and it's good these little annoying quirks are happening because it kind of shows you what can happen. If I go File, Close, it only just closed the timeline. So you're kind of going, File, Close, it's kind of closing that window rather than closing the project. So if you want to close the project and get out of it, you go File, Close Project, and that actually will close the whole thing. I don't want to save it because I don't want to save any changes. So I'll just go Don't Save. All right, I'll just close this up because I don't want this. All right, so of course, this video is recorded, so it's by no means you're expected to try and follow along or understand everything 100%. Premiere can be a bit scary, so it's more of an introduction to give you an idea of how it's done, and then you can rewatch the video in your own time and go along at your own pace, and then do a little bit more research and look online for some other tutorials that are out there so you can expand your knowledge. So the first important thing we need to do is work out file structure. So actually having a very clear file structure for your video is very, very important. And the reason that's very important is that With video, if files get misplaced, Premiere kind of freaks out. So you need to make sure you have a very good file structure. So the file structure that we tend to work on is what we tend to do is have just a folder with the name of the actual project, in this case, quantum computer. And then inside that, we have separate folders for assets. And assets is where we kind of put images, video, just other random things. Sorry, not videos, like images, sounds, just other random stuff that might be part of the project, like scripts as well can go in there. So footage, this is where we actually put the video footage. So we've actually got 3 clips being used today. And I've actually put them into more separate folders for A cam and B cam. And the reason we do that is it's just separating out the types of camera. So A cam is the front camera. So A cam is the main camera that basically stayed on the person for their speech. It was only a short speech of 2 minutes, so that's nice and short to present to camera, nothing too drastic. If it was any longer than that, we might have multiple clips because we might have done it a few different takes because they might have made a mistake, or they might have just wanted to break it up, because that's one thing is you don't want to have dialogue that's too long in one go because people tend to make a mistake. So this one's not too bad. He managed to get through this in one go. So that's A cam, the primary cam, and B cam. We had a second camera on set. So this was just pointed at the qubit or quantum computer. And we had some other shots as well of him as he was speaking. So labeling separate cameras just keeps things a little bit nice and neat. The output folder is where we put our final product. So the very final video file that is the completed package goes into the output folder when we save it. And Premiere is where our Premiere template lives, or our Premiere project would sit. So a really nice, easy way for you guys to actually just create a Premiere project is just use the template that I give you today. So at the end of this session, I'll be able to send out this Premiere template, and essentially this has all the settings and all the graphics in it already for you, so you can just sort of use that straight away as a really good base to build your videos. So it's a really good starting point. So I'm going to open that template up, and it's going to be nice and blank, basically as you would see if you were getting it for the first time. All right, so you'll see that we've got all our windows as we sort of had them before. All right. So now the first step when we're sort of working with this is kind of, I don't want to sort of just dump stuff on this timeline here and overwrite any of the existing things that are here. And what I mean by overwrite is sometimes when you bring clips into a timeline, you can kind of put them over the top of other things and they get deleted very easily. So what I'm going to do is any clips I bring in, I'm just going to start a little bit further along. It doesn't matter how far along this timeline you start your video, because you can always move it later on. So I'm going to start my video sort of here. So then I can just plop things in where I need them to go. And then once I've actually got it all together, then I'll start rearranging and moving all these other elements to sit on top of it and to sort of do the final package. All right. So I'm going to bring in my other files, or my video files. So they basically, what happens if they come in over here in this area here. So there's a few of these tabs here that we don't ever use. Like, I don't think I've ever used the media browser. So I'm going to right click and close that. Never use libraries, right click, close it. Info, right click, close. Markers, right click, close. Don't need that. Don't need any of that. The only one that I want is, where did it go? Oh, see, now I've gone, oh no, panel groups. Oh, what have I done? I've lost the panel I actually wanted. Oh, no, I don't even know where it is. Where did it go? Maybe I just go to window. The folder I want is, the one I want is project, so I might just go to window project to get that back up. I might have closed it by accident before, but anyway. If that doesn't pop up, you just go to window project, and basically you get this little window here, and this sort of shows the file structure of this particular project. And I've already put in some folders here for you to put in some things. So when you receive this, you will already have these in there, and I'll just show you what they are. So in the FX folder essentially has just that that end plate, the logo at the end, and that nice fade built in. So that's what those are there. And also has a bit of the black fade here as well. So we've got that black fade there, which is good. And they also have these things, which are what we call motion graphics templates. And that's these things here. So that's these, the super and the intro. So what I would suggest is opening up the project, and if these work and it doesn't come up with any errors, then you don't have to do anything. But if it comes up with any errors saying that for whatever reason that's missing, it says, oh, the UQ super is missing, or this intro is missing, then what you'll need to do is just basically go and import those motion graphics files into Premiere. And it's quite easy to do. It's a matter of just going over to your Essential Graphics tab over here, going to Browse, and then you just got a little plus symbol down here. And if you go to the plus symbol, and then you essentially just go and navigate to where that stuff is. So for me, it's on the, where am I? It's on the desktop. So for me, it's in Essential Graphics folder in Assets. So you can literally just click on them, click on one, go open, and it will. It already exists, so I don't really need to do this again. But for you, it would just import, and then it would probably just work from then on. But if it still doesn't work, and you've imported it, it means you probably just need to drag it in. And the way you can do that is you'll see over here, I've actually got a whole heap of different templates here that we can choose from. So if I just literally type UQ in the search bar up here, you'll have intro, and I can literally just grab that and drag and drop that in. And that's basically just done exactly the same thing as what is here. So if it ever breaks, you can always find it over here once they're installed and drag them in. Again, there's a lot sort of going on in this project, but yeah, it'll sort of make sense and sink in once we start piecing together, and once you sort of rewatch this video a second time and just jump in and have a play yourself. So let's get the video files in. So a really quick and easy way is just to double click on this little gray area here, and that'll bring in the dialog box, or you can always go to File, and you can go to Import. It does this a similar thing. So either way will bring up the same kind of box. And again, I'm just going to go to my desktop, Content Computing, Footage, and I'm going to click and just drag and select both of those, A-cam and B-cam, and go Import. And then you'll see that's imported into here. So now I've got that video footage in there and in there. And I can double click on it, and I can actually open it up in a separate window to my little viewer here. So this actually allows me to watch the entire video here before I bring it into my timeline. So I can double click on them, just check them and see what they're all about. So from this, I sort of know that, all right, this clip here is the entire sequence, sort of 2.5 minutes long. And this one here as well, this one down here, it seems to be roughly the same, 2.5-ish minutes. So both these clips were recorded at exactly the same time. And this is one way that you can actually set up your projects, by actually having two cameras and recording at the same time. And then what you do is when you bring it into Premiere, you sync those two bits of video up. So what that means is that Premiere will look at the audio from both of those clips, and it will sync them up, which means that then it makes it really, really easy to actually just cut between those two different angles without having to worry about things going out of sync. All right. So a way to do that is I just got to decide what video I want underneath first. So I think this video will be the primary video that I want to see, whereas this one I sort of will be the one that just cuts in every so often. So what I might do is I might actually grab this clip, which is the sort of the cutaway one of the computer, click and just drag that over to my timeline, and you'll see it sort of starts to come up as this blue thing. And if I just drop it on, you'll see now it's appeared on my timeline basically as a piece of video, and I can scrub along it like I sort of did before. And you'll see that I can sort of move this bar here to sort of navigate through, but also I can click and drag these little circles further or closer apart. See how the little circles on each end of the bar? The further apart, it means I can zoom out and see my entire timeline a bit better. All right, so I've put that one down. And now what I want to do is, because the other footage is going to be my primary footage, I want to plop that on top. So what I'll do is I'll click on that and I'll drag, and you'll see that the further you drag it up, the more separated they get. So what you want to do is you want to kind of bring it down so it sits on top. And you'll see that we have video here. These two are video and these two are audio. And you can tell the audio because it's got kind of that, what we call the waveforms. It's basically just a graphical representation of audio. And that's how you can really distinguish between them. Also, you'll see that above the line you have V for video and below the line you have A for audio. So these two clips here, as I said, they'll record at the same time. So they'll have the same sort of voice. And what we can do is we can sync them up so we can really easily cut between those two shots now. So what I can do is I can just select both and I can just click and, click drag like that. And that'll allow me to select both. I can right click, and sometimes if there's not enough room, it'll come up like this and you just go down to the arrow and it continues down. And you go synchronize. All right, so click synchronize. And then basically you can leave the settings as default, go okay. All right. And boom, it analyzed the audio and now it's put it in sync. So now these two clips are happening at exactly the same time, which is really awesome. But we have 2 bits of audio happening at the same time, which
setup, we use green laser light to read,
which doesn't sound amazing. And the reason it doesn't sound amazing is because one of these cameras was recording really nice audio from a really nice microphone here, a little lapel mic, whereas this other camera, this second angle here, that was actually just recording from the camera microphone. So it sounds really distant, echoey, and just sounds yuck. So what we can do is we can actually just mute this particular audio track just so we can get rid of it. Not get rid of it, I should say, just so we can kind of mute it so we don't have to worry about it. And you just do that by going to the track and clicking the M, and that's muted that track. And now we can just play that.
Atom, and then a vacant spot next door. And this NV center, nitrate.
All right, and so now we're just left with this nice clear audio track here. And some people say you should delete this, but I sort of like to keep that there just in case at some point while you're editing the audio goes out of sync and you need to resync it for whatever reason. It's good to keep the audio from the other camera there as well. All right. So a few things that we want to do before we proceed any further, and it's probably do a bit of color correction. Obviously, we've got bits cut off, so we need to shrink that down. And do a bit of audio correction as well, because even though it is from a nice lapel mic,
and it's the states of these electrons that we manipulate and use as our qubit.
It's hard to hear through the computer, but there's still a little bit of background noise in there as well that might have been from an air conditioner or something like that. So we'll just correct that. We also then might be able to, I'll sort of show you what level of audio it should be as well. So first of all, let's just get it so we can see the whole of him. All right, so the way that we do that is you click on the clip, and basically just to know what clip you're working on, this top clip here is the clip that's seen. And the clip that's underneath that is obviously hidden away, and you'll see that clip becomes, you start to see it because that top one ended. So that's how that works. So to make this video just fit the constraints of our video, of our timeline, you just right click on it and you go down, all right, and you go set to frame size. All right. So always go set to frame size rather than scale. Scale does something funky that you don't want. Go set to frame size. And so I'll do the same thing with this one. I'll right click. All right. Go set to frame size. All right. And then so now you'll see they'll fit nicely. All right. But, I sort of probably I could probably come into this shot just a little bit. He's got a bit too much headroom. Maybe you just want to bring that down a little bit. So what we can actually do is, because this footage was filmed at a higher resolution than the actual timeline we're working on. So in yesterday's course, I talked about 4K video versus HD footage. So if we filmed in high definition footage, and this timeline we're working on at the moment is just a high definition timeline, it means that we wouldn't be able to zoom in and out on the footage. Well, we could, but it would lose quality. But because our video is actually bigger than essentially the video canvas we're working on, hence why I had to shrink it down, what we can do is we can go over to here and we can go into the motion effect settings here, and you'll see how you've got scale. So if I just click and drag that left and right, you'll see that'll give me the ability to scale that up and down, and I can scale that all the way back up to 100 without losing any quality. Obviously, if you go further than that, it starts looking like a potato. But if you sort of just lock it off, you don't go past 100, you can probably go 100 and a little bit over, but not too much. So for me, I'm just going to bring that in just a bit, maybe 56, and then you'll see the position. Now, these are coordinates. Now, I'm not going to explain what the coordinates mean. Just basically mean that if you click and drag that first number left and right, it just moves the picture left and right. You click and drag this one, it moves it up and down. So that just gives me the ability to just zoom in just a little bit on my picture, just so I don't have as much stuff going on around the edge that I don't need. All right. Cool. And this other shot here, I won't, this other shot, I'll just do the same thing to that shot. And the way that I can sort of see that shot, because at the moment it's hidden, you can see on the tracks we've got the eyes. So the eyes are essentially like the mute. They're basically muting the video. So if I click the eye for that top layer, you'll see it'll hide that. And the nice thing about this is I don't need to worry about zooming in on that. That looks fine as it is. So I don't need to faff around with that. All right. So in terms of color correction, there's not really a great deal I need to do to this, but I'll show you the sort of the general settings that you might want to use. So if you click on your clip and you go over to Lumetri color over here, you have these slider settings that you might be familiar with if you've sort of done any video editing or image editing on your phone or in Photoshop or whatever. There's a few that you should be made aware of, and there's others that you just don't really need to touch unless you get into a little bit more advanced. So if your footage looks a little bit warm, as in, if your footage looked like that, for example, which is a little bit warm, then this slider here, you can sort of drag it. This is changing the white balance. It's basically the temperature. So if your video was too warm, you could sort of cool it off a bit. Particularly if you're under certain type of lighting, you may want to drag that slider. There's also some instances where your footage may come across and it might be a little bit too green, so you want to add a little bit of warmth. It might be a bit too much magenta, so you want to tint it down to the green. There's no rules around this, I think, for this kind of video. It's just have a play and just see what looks good. And the same with saturation. If you feel that the video is just lacking in a little bit of oomph in terms of color saturation, then you can sort of bring that up. Obviously, avoid making him look sunburnt. And obviously just, go the other way and it looks like it was made, 70 years ago. So yeah, even just the slightest bit of color punch is probably all right just before he gets a little bit too sunburnt. If it was too dark, you might choose to brighten it up. If it was too bright, you might try and darken it down. If you want to just give it a bit of punch, contrast is a really good way of just sort of darkening the darks and just giving it a bit more, might give it a bit more contrast. It makes it look a bit nicer. A little bit of contrast. And I'll talk about highlights and shadows. I won't worry about anything else in this panel because we've got, it's too much. These are sort of stuff you can investigate in your own time. Highlights are really good if you have areas of your image that you sort of just want to brighten up the lighter parts of it. Or there might be some darker parts in the image that are a bit too dark and you want to bring those up so you can adjust the shadows. So you can see the shadows are kind of bringing up those darker parts. So I might bring that up a bit so I get a bit more detail in the computer. Probably don't really need to mess around with the highlights. You can always reset this by double clicking the circle as well. So really just go by your eye and just have a bit of a play around. There's no sort of right or wrong. Well, of course that's wrong, but there's no right or real wrong. It's just making it look nice. Obviously, if it was for broadcast, for television, for Netflix, there'd be some rules around it. But for us, just make it look nice. All right. And if for any reason it's a little bit soft, as in a little bit blurry, then you can always go down to the creative section and just bump up the sharpening a bit. You'll sort of see it most evident in his shirt there. What that's doing. So you don't want to go too bad because it's going to look a little bit pixelated, but just again, just using your eye. If it's a little bit soft, you can always bring that sharpening up a little bit. I'm not going to worry on this particular one. All right, and you could do the similar thing to that shot there as well. I won't do it just for time purposes, but you could go in and you could switch this off. You could go to there and you could change the settings for that one as well. All right. So now we need to do a little bit of trimming. So if you use any kind of video editor before, the settings are relatively the same. You know, whenever you go anywhere near, and I'll sort of just zoom in a bit on this, I'll move these around so I get a bit more room. Whenever you move your cursor to any of these clips, you'll see it'll kind of change, particularly if you go to the end. So if I move to the end of that, it turns into this red sort of image pointing inwards, which means if I click and drag, what that's doing is you'll see it's actually bringing that piece of video in, and I let go, and essentially it's having that video start at that point there. All right, and I can always bring that footage back if I wanted to. And I can do the same thing with this piece of video here and drag it in. So essentially you can go in and you can say, all right, well, I want to chop that bit off. I want to chop that all the way up to there. And you can do like a bit of a rough sort of edit that way if you wanted to. But for us, I need to be very, very specific about what I want to cut. So you'll see he does a bit of a clap here. And the reason we do a clap is so we can sync the two cameras up really easily in terms of audio. And it's also just a really clear marker. It's like, that's pretty evident that that's something happened there. So that's a clap. And it's a good way to start a video. And so I know he starts around about there. So what I can do is I can essentially use my little playhead as a guide and say, all right, the video starts about there, move my cursor, and you'll see I can just basically just cut them in and it sort of sticks to the line, which is really good. And then I can play the video.
Do you want to look inside a quantum?
Yes, I want to look inside a quantum computer because quantum computers are awesome. So, and then essentially what you can do with this clip is sort of just go along and decide, all right, so at what points do I want this below footage to be seen? And the way that we can actually do that is by using the cutter. So we can actually cut the clip in order to reveal the footage below it. So in this particular case here, I'm going to cut the top clip between there and there because I want to see what's happening in this below clip. So if I go along and say, all right, well, then he refers to that again somewhere along here. Where does he refer it to it again? I mean, I could cut back to it at any point if I wanted to. So he goes back and he sort of starts talking about it. So at that point, I might want to cut to that particular clip again. So first of all, let's do the first one. So if I want to make a bit of a cut, what I can do is, all right, I think, well, I want to go to that other clip around about here. So what I do is I literally, so I go over here to the razor tool, it's literally a razor. I click on that. And then what I can do is I can then use that playhead again as my guide and I can click and it's actually made a cut in that clip. And then I know that, all right, he gets back to talking around about here. So I can go and cut that clip there. And so what's happening there is that what I can do is I can essentially delete that piece of clip there. Now, the thing to remember here, though, is if I go and press delete on that, it gets rid of the audio as well, which I don't really want because I want to still hear the sound of the thing opening and all that sort of jazz. I don't really want to mess around with the audio. So I'm just going to go edit, undo on that. A way to avoid messing around with the audio is what you can do is you can select all the clips, then go right click, scroll down, and I'm just going to go unlink. And so what that allows me to do now is that if that's unlinked, now I can click on that, press delete, and it doesn't delete the audio because now they're unlinked. That goes along, that plays, cuts in close to there, then cuts back to there when he speaks, which is great. All right, then it goes along. And I'll do the same thing here when he refers to it here. So he refers to it there. So I'll do the same thing there. Cut. Cut. And I'll go to my tool. So my selection tool is the one that I use for when I want to click on things and delete or go to the edge of something and drag. The razor tool is what I use when I want to chop stuff up. So click on there, delete, go through, refers to it there. So I could just go through the whole video and do that kind of thing all the way through. I won't do it for this one, just for time purposes, but that's how you would sort of go through and cut up that. So he also mentions at this end bit that there's going to be like a green light happening. So I've actually shot that as a separate piece of footage. So what I can do is I can actually find that footage, which is over here. Yep, so that's that one there. And what I can do is I can go, all right, well, that piece of footage is quite long. It's 38 seconds long. So I don't actually want to have that whole piece of footage, because what I could do is I could drag that whole bit of footage in like that and drop it on. That's fine. I could do it that way. Or another way that you can actually select a smaller portion of footage before you bring it into your timeline is by using what we call in and out points. So what I can do is I can get my little blue playhead here and be like, all right, so I want maybe 5 seconds. So I can say, all right, maybe from here, and then I press I on the keyboard. And I go to, here maybe, so what we got, 10, if I go to say 15 seconds, and I go O on the keyboard. So I for in, O for out. And what it does is it creates this little area here, and essentially that is what part of that video is going to actually be dragged in when I drag it in. So I don't drag it from here now, I can drag it from here. All right. But the problem is it's bringing the audio as well, and I don't want the audio of this clip. So what I can do is instead of dragging from there, if I don't want the audio, I can just click on this little film thing here, click on that and drag that and drop that on. And that just brings that clip in only on its own.
I'll just get it going.
I can put that wherever I want. I can move it wherever I want. I can make that clip longer. I can make it shorter. I can cut it just like any other clip. I can also right click on it, go set to frame size. And again, that's happening as he's talking about the green lasers doing their thing. So you can layer footage on top of itself, and you can choose whether to bring in the video, or you can just bring in the audio. If it's just got audio, you can just bring in the audio and drop that down the bottom here if you just wanted the audio, and you can click on stuff and delete. Or you can bring both by dragging the whole thing. Yeah. Now, he also talks about looking at the things moving on the computer screen. I actually recorded that towards the end of the clip, and I'll just drag that in so I can see it. So it's this information here. So what I can do here is I can get that, and I can go, all right, well, I just want to cut just a little segment of that. So what I can do is I get my playhead to there, get my razor, click on it, go, all right, I'm going to get that bit. I'm going to go back to my move tool or my selection tool, grab that. I'm going to put that just after that other clip. So essentially here he's talking about the fact the laser's happening, and as the laser's happening, you've got this diagram doing something.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how you would sort of progress. You would continue to progress to bring more and more stuff in. And if you wanted to bring in images, if I import an image, so for example, I go to my files and I have an image I want to bring in, it can be JPEG, PNG or whatever. The same way I would import either by double clicking or going File, Import, select it. Oh, did I just select? I think I just selected the wrong thing. What did I do? What did I just do? Oh, I don't know what I did then. So I've imported that image, and that image can be dragged on exactly like any other piece of video, and it can be dragged out, it can be moved. You can go to here, effect controls, you can scale it up and down, you can rotate it, you can change the position, all that kind of jazz. And of course, if you want to get rid of it altogether, you just click on it and press delete. All right. So now I just want to clean things up. I probably should actually clean up the audio first. So I don't need to clean up the audio of this one. Maybe just clean up the audio of this track here, simply because it's got a little bit of background noise, which is hard to hear, I know, in this room and through Zoom. So what I want to do, if I want to clean that track up, what I can do is I can click down here, and you see how I make a little selection, and that just selects just the audio for him speaking. And I can go over to Essential Sound, which is over here. And then what I do is I choose what kind of audio it is. So in this particular case, it's dialogue. So I can click dialogue. All right. And then what I can do is I know this has a bit of noise in the background. So I can tick the reduce noise. And then what I can do there is just 5's a bit much. If it's really horrendous noise, maybe 5. But if it's just a little bit of background noise, and I can just
we
play that through.
manipulate and use as our qubit. In this particular setup, we use green laser light to
So in this particular
read out
example, for me, I can kind of determine that around about 3.5 sounds good. And again, there's no rules around this apart from the fact that move that slider up until the background noise is gone, but hasn't removed too much of the depth and niceness for the person's voice. If you make that reduced noise too high, it'll just start sounding like a robot. So that's one thing you can certainly do, is reducing the noise. The other thing is volume. So if I just play my
state
video
of the
through
qubit,
and I get
we
a sense of the
excite
volume, what we try to
electrons
do
high
is we try to
energy
get
with,
it.
with
So
the
this
green laser
green
light
bar
and
here,
look at the
most
red
of the time,
fluorescence that comes out.
it's
So that's
just
the optical
over
module,
-6.
this part of the kit.
In this case,
here.
it sort of is
to
every so
control
often.
the state of our qubit, to go from 0 to 1, or to create
But if it
superpositions,
wasn't, what we would do is we would go down to, again, making sure it's all selected. We would go down to clip volume, and we would drag that upwards. And we can do that as it was playing, and you do that.
In fact, it's in the microwave
until that
regime.
green bar,
So
sort of
we
most
have
of the
our
time,
microwave
it's around that
unit
-6.
down
So if I bring that all the way up,
the other bits and pieces are a power supply
which is
and
bad.
a bit of kit to analyze the output and feed it to the computer. The computer controls
want to
everything
avoid
that
it going
happens
too
in
much
here
into the-
and reads out the data. I'll just get it going, and you might see the flashes of green laser light in
that's
here
not
as
too
the
bad.
device prepares the qubit.
At the sort of the louder parts of what he's saying, it tends to sort of reach -6 to just above, and that's kind of what we want. So you're just basically adjusting that slider just to suit it so it just bounces just above that -6, but doesn't go any higher. Otherwise, you start getting a bit of distortion. So now let's start cleaning this up. So our video sort of plays out, and then we want it to end. You see there's a little bit of audio here, I think, of him just chatting at the end. I want to get rid of that. Really easy. Hover over it, click, drag in. I want to get rid of this audio too. Click, drag in. Even though it's not being heard, just move it around to clean it up. I don't want this other clip appearing here. So again, I can click and drag that in. So now I've just got a nice, tight little presentation here, which is ready to put our nice graphics at the start and also our graphics at the end. So what I'll do is I'll start moving some stuff into position. First of all, I'll go and get this little end thing. So this end plate has this nice little fade already built in, so you don't need to worry about fades. So that fade is built into this little graphic here, and then it fades into the UQ logo. All right. So basically, if I just select that, I click on it and I drag it. And what I want to do is essentially drag it over to the end of my clip. And I might just go to here and zoom in a bit so you can see it. And what I want is I want that first bit of purple overlapping that last piece of clip. So I just drag that over so it just fades out nicely and fades into that. Now I want to get all of this moved in so it sits underneath here. But of course, you'll see if I do that, it's going to sit right over the top of some stuff and erase it. So I don't want that. If I put that there, it's erased. So it's sort of messed up my intro. So I'm going to undo that. It's just edit undo. So I'm going to click on that and just drag that up so it's above the track of everything else. And now what I can do is click, drag inwards, and I might just zoom in a bit. And what I want is I want that start of that clip to happen at the start, just when that fades from black in, and then you have the person's name coming up. All right, so we're almost there to having a semi-complete video. Just a few extra little things. So we need to give this a title. So the nice thing about these, what we call the essential graphics, is you can click on them and you can go over to the essential graphics panel over here and then just simply change the name of it. All right. So this one, what do we call this? This was just quantum computer, wasn't it? So if I go, just type in, oh, actually, UQ likes sentence case, not title case. All right. All right, quantum computing. And you can put a second line if you wanted to, and another second line if you wanted to. Then the person's name, you click on there, and you click into here, you go doctor, name, his doctor name person, then you would put his position, so lecturer or whatever. You don't normally need to put the University of Queensland in this because it's sort of implied that's where they're from. So you don't tend to do that. You tend to sort of just mainly you might put their position. So, they're a lecturer in whatever, and then you will put their school underneath that. You don't put school of though. So if his doctor name person, right, and his position is lecturer in computing, and then you put he in the school might be whatever the school is, science or whatever. So you don't put school of, you just put science or the environment or economics or whatever in there, not school of. And so, yeah. So when I was talking about internal and external facing stuff, these kind of graphics here, they're really sort of designed for mainly internal sort of student facing stuff. If you're going to be going and doing anything external facing, then the best person to contact is marketing and communications. And what they can do is they can steer you in the right direction of the other kind of motion graphics templates you can use that have the correct fonts and the correct colors for external facing work. They're a little bit more strict just to protect the brand. But for internal facing stuff, this is fine. External, just have a chat with them and they'll point you in the right direction of the kind of templates you need. The one other thing we'll probably do is at the moment, this audio just kind of starts. It doesn't have any sort of fade in. And we kind of probably want a little bit of a fade in at the beginning of this audio so it doesn't just start with noise abruptly. We want to have it sort of fade in. So the way we do that is you literally just move to the start of this clip, you right click and you go apply default transition. And what that will do
you want to look inside?
That will fade that in nicely. And the same thing I can do to the end. Actually, I might drag that in a bit. Right click, apply default transition, and that just will fade things out nicely. If I want that to be longer, I can hover over it and I get this little red square bracket. I can click and drag out, makes it longer, click and drag it, makes it shorter. So that's a really good way of adding this nice little fade out to your piece of video, audio, I should say. If you want to put a nice transition, say, between shots, so say, you wanted this piece of video here to fade out and this one to fade in, then this is where you can go to the effects panel over here, over your left, go video transitions, and you've got a whole heap, but mostly you're going to use dissolve. And cross dissolve is actually the default. So you don't even need to go to this panel. You can literally just right click on the piece of video, go apply default transition, right click on the end, default transition, and you'll see that clip will then fade out.
The red fluorescent.
And then it will fade into the next one. But say you didn't want it to fade, you wanted it to go to black, you could say go dip to black, and you could click on that, drag that to the end of the clip, drop it in, and then that will then fade to black instead of a crossfade. So that's how you apply those, is you either right click on it, right click on the end of the clip and go, I can clear that. I can right click, apply default transition, which in this case is cross dissolve, or I can drag it from over the left and drop it in. All right. And if you're ever wanting to add audio to your videos as well, I have a piece of audio. Oh no, I don't, not yet. Where is it? I go into my quantum computer, I go to assets, I bring in a piece of audio. Again, you can utilize that much like any other clip in your timeline. You can grab it, you can drop it in, drop it down underneath, so it's in the audio tracks, and then you can shrink it to make it fit. As you do any other clip, you can right click on the end of it, go apply transition so it fades in and fades out. Sorry, just fades out, or if you want it to fade in, you can right click on the beginning and go fade in. If you want to change the volume of that, then there's two ways you can do the volume. A quick and dirty way really is to just play the video and then, just go over to Essential Sound, go to music instead of dialogue, and then go down to here where you have your level and just play it through and just drag that down.
With the green laser light, and look at the red fluorescence that comes out. So that's the option.
And basically just adjust it until you feel like it's not super loud, because you want to be able to prioritize hearing the person speak over the audio in the background. So, and that sounds
nitrogen atom and then a vacant.
that sounds not too bad. And of course, it then fades out towards the end over the UQ logo at the end there. So it looks quite nice. Yeah. So overall, that's sort of a pretty bog standard way to edit a video. Obviously, they can be much simpler. So, if for example, you had this clip here and you only had one angle, then obviously you could just stick with the one angle the whole time. You could, if you recorded in 4K, for example. So if you recorded this video in 4K, you could actually say, I'll just mute that audio, the video, sorry, the music. So, at the points where he refers to the actual computer, you could actually cut that clip up, right? So that's actually a separate clip now. And you could zoom that separate clip in and adjust the positioning of it. So you could just have one camera and use that as your secondary option if you wanted to. So that's another way to achieve that same effect without multiple cameras. So the last step of this is, well, it should have been one of the first steps, is actually making sure you save it. We've gone a whole hour without saving it, which is a little bit bonkers. So obviously make sure that you go File, Save as you go along. Premiere does have an auto-save function, so it would have saved as we were going along, but obviously just make sure you're sort of just going save every so often. All right, exporting a video out. So we've created a video. Now we need to get it out into a standalone video file. So the way we do that is we just go up to the top and you can click export. And again, there's a lot going on in this area. It could be a bit scary. Basically, what I suggest is just make it super simple. It'll have a preset. YouTube knows what they're doing. Use and find the YouTube preset. If it's not up the top, it might be here. So I would just say use the YouTube 1080p full HD preset. All right. And then down the bottom right, it gives you a bit of an idea of how big the file is. It's still a bit big for what I like. So what we do is we change all our videos to a smaller data size by reducing what we call the data rate of our video. And it's essentially how much data is processed every second to run the video. And the lower that is, the lower the file size. So you just go down to video, click more. And again, there's a lot of scary settings in here, but ignore most of them. Scroll down and literally where it says target bitrate, and it's always choose VB done. You don't have to worry what any of this means. Just choose it. It works. We've been doing this for years. It's a good setting to use. Change to VBR, one pass, change that number to 5. And you're off to the races without having to worry about what it all means. Just put it to those settings. And that's reduced it to 100 megabytes, which is a decent size for this kind of 2.5-minute video. All right. And then you need to give it a name. So, give it whatever name, obviously quantum computing, you'd call it, not gobbledygook like that. Then you go location, click, where are we? Premiere. Oh yeah. So if you want to tell it where to go, this is where the location is. So you go down to location, you click that. All right. And now you tell it where you want it to go. In this particular case, we want it in the output folder. All right. And when you go save, you'll see it'll have quantum computer output. You've given a name. You've done the YouTube preset. And it'll now say custom because you've gone in and customized it to put in that 5 there. And last thing is to make sure it's set to entire source. Otherwise, it might select smaller portions you don't want. Just to be safe, entire source means it's going to do the entire clip in its entirety. And then you go export. And then essentially what it will do is it'll export that video out. It'll give you a bit of a timeline on how long it'll take. And then that will appear in that output folder.